My uncle gifted me a PS5, but my parents forced me to give it to my golden child sister. Then she landed in jail for stealing her boyfriend's car and my parents lost everything. I never thought I'd be writing something like this on Reddit, but I really need to get this off my chest and maybe get some perspective from people who aren't involved in this mess. I apologize in advance if this comes across as a ramble. There's just so much to unpack here. I'm 20 years old and I have a younger sister Madeline who's 18. To understand the current situation, you need to know the history of how my family dynamics work. From as far back as I can remember, Madeline has been the golden child in our family. Every single thing had to revolve around her wants and needs, while mine were always pushed aside or treated as less important. Let me give you some examples of what I mean. When we were kids and I got straight A's except for one B+ in a really tough class, my parents barely acknowledged it. But when Madeline got all B's and one A, they took her out to celebrate and bought her a new phone. When I made the varsity basketball team in high school, they missed most of my games because Madeline had dance recitals or needed help with homework. But they never missed a single one of her performances, even if it meant taking time off work. It wasn't just about achievements either. Every birthday, every holiday, every special occasion, Madeline always got the better gifts, more attention, and more praise. If I got a $50 gift card, she had to get a $100 one. If I asked for new sneakers because mine were worn out, they'd say money was tight. But Madeline could ask for designer clothes anytime and they'd somehow find the money. The only person who ever treated me fairly was my Uncle Phil, my dad's younger brother. He's 38, successful in his career as a software engineer, and lives alone since his wife passed away 5 years ago. Uncle Phil has always been more like a father figure to me than my actual dad. He would come to my games when my parents couldn't make it, help me with my homework, and just listen when I needed someone to talk to. He noticed how my parents treated me differently from Madeline and tried to make up for it in his own way. Not by spoiling me with gifts or anything, but by spending quality time with me and teaching me valuable life skills. He taught me how to code, helped me get my first part-time job, and even taught me how to change a tire, things my dad never bothered to do. For my 20th birthday last month, Uncle Phil surprised me with a PS5. I couldn't believe it when I opened the gift. I had been wanting one since they came out but could never afford it between my college expenses and the part-time job I worked to cover my personal costs. My parents never would have bought me something like that. They always said video games were a waste of time and money, at least when it came to me. When I opened that gift, I actually teared up a bit. It wasn't just about getting an expensive console, it was about having someone who cared enough to notice what I wanted and valued my happiness. Uncle Phil had remembered a conversation we had months ago where I mentioned wanting to play some of the new PS5 exclusive games. The fact that he not only remembered but went out of his way to get me one meant everything to me. For 2 glorious days, I was on cloud 9. I set it up in my room, downloaded some games, and even managed to get a few hours of gaming in between classes and work. But of course, Madeline had to ruin it, just like she ruins everything else in my life. She came into my room without knocking, something she does all the time despite my complaints, and saw me playing. At first, she just stood there watching, and then she started asking questions about how much it cost and who bought it. When I told her it was a birthday gift from Uncle Phil, her expression changed completely. She stormed out of my room, and I knew right then that trouble was coming. Sure enough, less than an hour later, I heard her crying downstairs to our parents. She was going on and on about how unfair it was that I got such an expensive gift when she was the one who deserved it more. Her reasoning? She had better grades than me in high school, I had a 3.5 GPA, she had a 3.8, and got into a slightly better college than me. Never mind that our parents had already bought her a MacBook Pro for starting college, an iPhone 13 Pro just because she wanted one, and countless other expensive things that I never got. Never mind that she already had a Nintendo Switch that she barely used anymore. No, seeing me have something nice for once was just unbearable for her. That evening, my dad came to my room. I was already expecting it, but what happened next still managed to shock me. He didn't just suggest or ask, he demanded that I give the PS5 to Madeline. When I refused, pointing out that it was my birthday gift from Uncle Phil, he got angry. He said that as long as I lived under his roof, I had to follow his rules, and his rule was that Madeline should have the PS5. I tried to reason with him. I explained how much the gift meant to me, how I never got expensive things like Madeline did, how unfair this was. But he wouldn't listen. Instead, he pulled out his trump card. He threatened to stop paying for my college if I didn't comply. My mom, who had followed him upstairs, backed him up completely. She said I was being selfish and immature, and that I needed to think about Madeline's feelings. I was so upset I could barely think straight. I called Uncle Phil and told him what was happening. He was furious. He offered to let me move in with him right then and there, but I knew that would only make things worse. I was still dependent on my parents for college, and I couldn't risk losing that, no matter how unfair the situation was. In the end, I had to give Madeline the PS5. The way she took it from my room still makes my blood boil. She didn't say thank you, didn't show any gratitude. She just smirked at me and carried it off like it had been meant for her all along. Uncle Phil was so angry about the whole thing that he stopped talking to my dad completely. My parents' justification for this made it even worse. They said Madeline needed it more because she was stressed about college applications, even though she had already been accepted, and that I was too old for video games anyway. According to them, I should be focusing on my studies instead of wasting time gaming. Meanwhile, Madeline spent hours every day playing games on my PS5 instead of studying, but apparently that was completely fine. Update 1. Hey everyone, it's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I really need to vent about everything that's happened. First, I want to thank everyone who commented and offered support. Reading your responses helped me feel less crazy about this whole situation. So, my parents managed to get Madeline out on bail, but it wasn't easy. They had to drain Dad's retirement account and still came up short, so they started calling every relative they could think of to borrow money. Most of our relatives agreed to help, mostly because my parents painted Madeline as this innocent victim who made one tiny mistake. They conveniently left out the part about her trying to sell the car to what she thought were criminals. But here's where things get even worse. What I didn't mention in my original post, because I didn't know about it then, is that Madeline didn't just try to sell her boyfriend's car, she completely betrayed his trust in every possible way. While she was dating him, she managed to get access to all his passwords and banking information.
Now you can watch the second part by clicking share and more.
Update. My uncle gifted me a PS5 but my parents forced me to give it to my golden child sister. Then she landed in jail for stealing her boyfriend's car and my parents lost everything. The police investigation revealed that she had systematically emptied his accounts, transferring almost $50,000 to different accounts over the course of several weeks before the car incident. Her ex-boyfriend is absolutely devastated. He's this really nice guy who comes from a wealthy family, and he treated Madeline like a princess. He gave her access to his apartment, his car, everything, because he actually trusted her. Now he feels like an idiot for not seeing the signs sooner. The car has been recovered and returned to him, but he's pressing charges for both the car theft and the bank fraud. His parents have hired a team of expensive lawyers, and they're not backing down. My parents, predictably, are still living in their fantasy world where Madeline can do no wrong. Mom keeps saying things like there must be some mistake or someone must have forced her to do this. Dad is even worse. He's trying to blame the boyfriend, suggesting that maybe he gave Madeline permission to sell the car and is now lying about it. When that theory got shot down, because, security cameras exist, he switched to saying the boyfriend must have done something terrible to provoke Madeline into stealing from him. But the biggest bombshell came from Uncle Phil this week. He finally decided to share something he'd been keeping to himself for years. Remember how Madeline always seemed to have expensive things even when our parents claimed they couldn't afford them? Turns out she wasn't just manipulating our parents, she was straight up stealing from Uncle Phil. He sat my parents down and showed them security camera footage from his house. The video showed Madeline, on multiple occasions, going through his office drawers, taking cash from his wallet, pocketing electronics, and even stealing some of his late wife's jewelry. Some of these incidents went back 2 or 3 years. He had installed the cameras after noticing things going missing, but he never confronted her about it because he didn't want to cause problems in the family. The footage is absolutely clear. You can see Madeline checking if the coast is clear, then methodically searching through things and taking whatever she wanted. She even had a system, always going for small items that might not be missed right away. Uncle Phil estimates that over the years, she stole at least $15,000 worth of stuff from him. You'd think this evidence would finally make my parents see the truth, right? Wrong. Instead of accepting that their precious daughter is a thief, they turned on Uncle Phil. Mom actually screamed at him, accusing him of doctoring the footage to make Madeline look bad. Dad suggested that Uncle Phil was just bitter about the PS5 situation and was trying to get revenge. Then, because apparently they hadn't sunk low enough, they started implying that maybe I had something to do with it since I spent so much time at Uncle Phil's house. The really frustrating part is that some of our relatives are actually buying my parents' ridiculous theories. My aunt, Dad's sister, called me yesterday to say that even if Madeline did steal from Uncle Phil, he should drop the charges because we're family and she's just a confused young girl. She said that since Madeline was always such a good student, this behavior must be out of character and therefore she deserves another chance. After that call, one of Madeline's former friends from high school reached out to me through social media. She told me that Madeline had been stealing from her friends for years. She would take makeup, clothes, jewelry, anything she could get her hands on. When confronted, she would either deny it completely or burst into tears and make the other person feel guilty for accusing her. Most people just stopped hanging out with her rather than deal with the drama, which explains why Madeline had trouble keeping friends despite being popular. Uncle Phil has decided to press charges for all the theft. He has detailed records of everything Madeline took, including photos of the items before they went missing and receipts proving their value. My parents are losing their minds over this. They've been calling and texting me nonstop, begging me to talk Uncle Phil out of it. They keep saying I'm the only one he'll listen to, and if I don't help, I'm choosing to destroy our family. I finally reached my breaking point. I blocked their numbers and accepted Uncle Phil's offer to move in with him. Yesterday, while they were meeting with Madeline's lawyer, I packed up my essential stuff and left. I wrote them a note saying I'd contact them when I was ready, but honestly, I don't know when that will be. Meanwhile, Madeline's ex-boyfriend's family is pushing for maximum charges on both the car theft and the bank fraud. They have the resources to make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug, and they're determined to see Madeline face consequences for her actions. My parents are talking about mortgaging the house to pay for her legal defense, and you know what? Not once during this whole mess have they asked how I'm doing or where I'm staying. It's still all about Madeline, even now. Update 2. It's been exactly a month since I moved in with Uncle Phil, and I need to update you all on the absolute chaos that's unfolded. Madeline's court date was last week, and what came out during the proceedings made everything we knew before look like child's play. The police investigation into Madeline's activities went much deeper than just the car theft and what she stole from Uncle Phil. Turns out, my sister had been running what the prosecutor called a sophisticated theft operation at her college. She wasn't just a thief, she was basically running a small crime ring. Her method was always the same. She would target wealthy students, usually guys but sometimes girls too. She'd either date them or become their close friend, always playing the role of the perfect girlfriend or best friend. She was apparently really good at figuring out which students came from money. Once she gained their trust, she would start gathering information, passwords, bank details, garage codes, everything. Then, when the time was right, she would clean them out. The $50,000 she took from her ex-boyfriend? That wasn't even her biggest score. The police found evidence of at least 5 other victims, with total stolen assets worth over $200,000. She had hidden most of it really well too. They found 3 different storage units rented under fake names, all filled with stolen items. We're talking about dozens of laptops, gaming consoles, designer clothes, jewelry, expensive watches, basically anything valuable she could get her hands on. But here's the craziest part. Madeline wasn't hoarding all this stuff for herself.
Now you can watch the third part by clicking share and more.
Final update. My uncle gifted me a PS5 but my parents forced me to give it to my golden child sister. Then she landed in jail for stealing her boyfriend's car and my parents lost everything. She was selling most of it through various online marketplaces and using different accounts to avoid detection. And what was she doing with all that money? Gambling. The police discovered she was a regular at underground poker games in the city. That's actually how she got caught. The undercover cops who busted her with the stolen car were originally investigating these illegal gambling rings, and Madeline just happened to walk right into their operation. Some of her victims showed up at the court hearing to testify. One girl broke down crying while describing how Madeline had been her roommate and best friend for a semester, only to disappear one weekend with her entire jewelry collection, including family heirlooms. Another guy talked about how Madeline had dated him for 3 months, then cleaned out his bank account and maxed out his credit cards while he was away at a family funeral. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor had bank records, online sale listings, storage unit contracts, surveillance footage, and text messages where Madeline bragged to some friends about how easy it was to scam rich idiots. Her words, not mine. She had even kept a notebook where she wrote down potential targets and their vulnerabilities. My parents finally seemed to be accepting reality, but not in the way you'd hope. Instead of acknowledging that Madeline needs serious help and consequences, they're destroying their own lives trying to save her from punishment. Dad cashed out his entire 401k, which means he'll have to pay a huge penalty on top of losing his retirement savings. Mom sold all her jewelry, including her wedding ring. They're trying to take out a second mortgage on the house, even though they can barely afford the first one. Yesterday, they called me for the first time since I moved out. I thought maybe they wanted to apologize or at least ask how I was doing. Nope. They wanted to know if I would consider taking a break from college for a year or two so they could use my tuition money for Madeline's legal defense. When I refused, they started guilt-tripping me, saying things like family should always come first and your sister's whole future is at stake. I lost it. I told them that they were the ones who destroyed this family by always enabling Madeline's behavior, and that I was done sacrificing my future for her. Mom started crying and Dad called me ungrateful, saying I owed them for all the years they supported me. I reminded them about the PS5 incident and all the other times they favored Madeline, but they just said I was being petty and holding on to childhood grudges. That's when I hung up on them. Uncle Phil has been amazing through all of this. He's helping me stay focused on my studies and teaching me about managing money responsibly. We sometimes talk about everything that's happened, and he keeps reminding me that none of this is my fault. He says he wishes he had spoken up sooner about Madeline's stealing, but he was trying to keep the peace in the family. The trial is still ongoing, but Madeline's lawyer is apparently trying to negotiate a plea deal. I'll update again when I know more, but honestly, I'm trying to distance myself from the whole situation. I'm finally starting to understand what it feels like to live in a healthy environment where I'm not constantly walking on eggshells or being compared to my sister. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been 6 months since this nightmare began, and I wanted to give you all a final update. A lot has happened, and while some things are finally settled, others are still falling apart. Madeline took a plea deal last month. She got sentenced to 3 years in prison with possibility of parole after 18 months. She also has to pay restitution to all her victims, somewhere around $300,000 in total between the stolen money, legal fees, and damages. The prosecutor wanted a longer sentence, but her lawyer argued that she was a first-time offender, at least officially, and came from a good family background. I attended the sentencing hearing, sitting with Uncle Phil at the back of the courtroom. Madeline didn't look anything like the confident, smirking sister I remembered. She cried through the whole thing, especially when her victims gave their impact statements. The guy whose car she tried to sell spoke about how her betrayal left him with trust issues. The girl whose family heirlooms were stolen and sold talked about how some things can never be replaced. For the first time, I saw Madeline actually seem to realize what she'd done. She gave this tearful apology speech about how sorry she was and how she wanted to make things right. The judge wasn't very impressed though, especially after the prosecutor showed evidence that she had tried to hide more stolen items even after getting arrested. My parents are in complete financial ruin. The house is in foreclosure because they can't keep up with both mortgages. They had to sell one of their cars and are moving into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment next month. Dad is talking about coming out of retirement to work again, even though he's not in great health. Mom had to get a job as a cashier at the grocery store to help make ends meet. The worst part is they still won't accept their role in all this. They blame Uncle Phil for pressing charges. They blame Madeline's ex-boyfriend for not dropping the charges. They even blame me for not helping with her legal fees. Last week, Mom called to tell me they were selling my childhood stuff to raise money for Madeline's commissary account. When I objected, she said I obviously didn't need any of it since I abandoned the family. I'm still living with Uncle Phil and focusing on my education. My grades actually improved since moving in with him because I'm not constantly dealing with family drama. He helped me set up a separate bank account and taught me about investing and saving money. We've developed this really great routine where we cook dinner together most nights and talk about our days. The PS5 that started this whole thing? We found out Madeline sold it online before she got arrested. She got maybe a quarter of what it was worth. Uncle Phil surprised me with a new one for Christmas, along with some games. But honestly, the best gift has been having a stable, supportive home environment for the first time in my life. Some relatives still try to pressure me to reconcile with my parents. They say things like they're still your parents and family is family. But I've learned that real family doesn't treat you like a second-class citizen or try to sabotage your future. Uncle Phil is more family to me than my parents ever were. I don't know if I'll ever have a normal relationship with my parents again. Maybe someday they'll realize how their favoritism and enabling behavior led to this situation. Maybe they'll understand that by always putting Madeline first, they lost their other child. But I'm not holding my breath waiting for that to happen. For now, I'm focused on building my own life. I'm doing well in school, I started therapy, Uncle Phil's suggestion, and I'm learning that it's okay to put myself first sometimes. Madeline will be eligible for parole in about a year, but I have no plans to be there when she gets out. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. To everyone who supported me through all this, thank you. Your comments and messages helped me stay strong when I was doubting myself. I'm going to sign off now and